Spoilers for The Walking Dead Season 2, everyone. I'll be lightly commenting on these other games too. Not spoilers, but still, if you want to go in blind, it's totally chill to skip on this video. Okay, ready? Here's my hot take for this episode. Attack on Titan is a zombie show. Now wait, don't click off the video just yet. This is about The Walking Dead. Just give me a second to make my point, okay? Attack on Titan, for the uninitiated, is an anime about man-eating monsters tearing through society, eating people. Sound familiar? The monsters resemble humans, with some large deviations, but they were formerly humans, at least look like humans, right? When the show starts out, it's a quest for survival, and as our heroes start overcoming these mindless threats, the true villainy is revealed to be the humans all along. Ringing any bells? Yeah, that's because I'm pulling hairs here. There's a recurring trend in the zombie genre, that of the zombies themselves slowly overshadowed by a far more dangerous human threat. We saw this in The Last of Us. The show in particular spends some extra time setting up the threat of this fungal disease that's about to wipe out humanity. But as the story starts to pick up, it turns into a road trip. The main threat? Other survivors. Resident Evil can't wait to bring up some secret organization that's really pulling the strings.
I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about.
It's not a unique trope to the Walking Dead franchise, but I think it always serves to enhance and humanize the story, maybe to legitimize it a little bit more. Not every production is like this, but the ones that do usually have something interesting to say. The Walking Dead, AOT, Last of Us, these are some storytelling heavy hitters, and I think it's because of the humans in the loop. Zombies take a backseat to the human threat. This couldn't be more true for Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 2. The Walking Dead Season 2 released its first episode in December of 2013, and it follows the story of Clementine after the events of the first game and mainly concerns her journey in a world that doesn't give a fuck that she's a kid in the apocalypse. The game takes her throughout a variety of settings, situations, relationships with other characters. The developers intended to make this game more about Clementine, figuring out who to trust, rather than being the person that protects somebody else, like with Lee in the last game. From the get-go, this is the major difference between this game and the first. You no longer play as the Protector. You no longer play as Lee. You're Clementine, the little girl from the first game, and all the implications that come with that. Clementine needs to figure out how to survive. She's got some general sense of what to do and what not to do, but she's still a child. No amount of book smarts is going to let her overpower a fully grown zombie. Though likewise, the simple yet unknown art of building a fire is largely gone in our present society, but comes back as an essential skill in a world overrun with the undead. Clementine has to figure out people. People she trusts, people she grows to trust, people who she trusts and then lose her trusts, and then people who can't be trusted. It's a zombie-eat-zombie world, and they're not even the biggest danger. If Clementine wants to survive, she needs to do things that Lee never had to. Despite these horrors, the world of The Walking Dead continues to be about relationships. Clementine doesn't have a daddy anymore, but that daddy game energy still permeates the sequel all the same. I'm not going to spend as much time comparing this game to other daddy games. Instead, I'd like to dive a little deeper into what this game is doing, and reflect on its differences compared to its predecessor. This is The Walking Dead Season 2. The Walking Dead Season 2 starts us out with what's left of our Season 1 cast. We didn't know it back in Season 1, but those two shadowy figures in the distance Clementine notices were actually Omid and Krista. They're back, and this time they're mega pregnant. Krista is, anyway.
What if it's a girl?
Then we name her Krista.
But I'm Krista.
Everything seems like rainbows and unicorns till a stranger walks in on Clementine in the bathroom. Before anything can be done about it, the stranger grabs Clem's gun, threatens her life, then shoots Omid as he tries to sneak beside her. Omid doesn't even make it 10 minutes into the new game without getting shot through the heart, and Clementine's to blame. The prologue to The Walking Dead reiterates the only theme in this game tied directly to gameplay. Actions have consequences. In Clementine's case, it was through inaction that Omid died, before the opening credits even got a chance to roll in. In her defense, who knows who could have walked through the door? Could have been 3 armed people, could have been 10, could have been Krista herself. Clementine would still have locked herself in that booth, gotten caught, and probably lost her gun. Had it actually been Krista or Omid, maybe she would have just gotten away with a talking to, but we'll never know.
I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to.
2 years have passed since the events of the last game. Clementine is 11, and Krista is no longer pregnant. She and Clem are chilling by the fire. Krista starts talking shit when Clementine sits there watching the fire die out, and this time she really does get a talking to. She's unable to survive. She can't even feed a simple campfire. She can't keep it alive.
You should be doing this, not me. Tending a fire so you can cook and stay warm. It's something you have to be able to do, Clementine. Otherwise...
So, Clementine learns how to build a fire. Just give her a chance, yo. She's 11. But it doesn't take too long to be interrupted by assailants again. We hear Krista off in the distance being accosted, and we get our first major choice of the game. Whether to distract the strangers or book it and leave Krista to her fate.
What the Krista, fuck? Run!
Hey! I say major with major quotation marks because, as you probably know from video 1 or just general knowledge from the Telltale games, these games are notorious for major choices not being all that choiceful at all. What I mean to say is, the only consequence for this moment is whether or not Krista the NPC makes a little yelp as you choose. You'll never see Krista again after this moment, no matter what you pick. Krista doesn't die or live based on your choice. You're kept out of the loop on her character's outcome for the rest of the franchise. Call it Schrodinger's Krista, or as I like to call it, a telltale moment. We get our first action sequence here, with Clementine running through the woods and getting one of the strangers eaten alive by zombies. There are a lot of moments like these where Clementine can just get fully alive people killed off, and it's never played off as a serious character moment, so long as it's not an ally. This game will get you used to the idea of an 11-year-old killing fully grown adults, so if you can't buy into that now, then this whole game will be a toughie. It's in the woods that Clementine runs into Sam, a dog. Woof woof. If a dog barks in the woods, does it make a sound?
Okay, boy, it's okay.
Seriously though, Sam, stop barking. We're gonna get caught. We get a larger open area to explore and solve a quick puzzle, landing ourselves a knife and playtime with the doggy.
Okay, bring it back.
We also find some food and have the option to feed it to Sam, but... Whoa, what the fuck, Sam? I was literally just giving you food. What the fuck? This part is pretty visceral, so skip to here if you're not a fan of animal death. I get it. No shame in it. Ready? Alright, so Clementine manages to kick the dog off her and it lands on top of spikes. Fuck. After making an intentional choice to play with Sam not 3 minutes ago, I now have to endure this miserable scene of putting Sam out of misery or leaving him to bleed out. It makes no difference what choice we make. Sam dies no matter what we do, but you get to choose how he dies. Put him out of his misery or let him slowly bleed out. Wouldn't be the first time to make this type of choice, huh, Clem? I ended up putting Sam down. As much as it hurts to put Clementine through all this shit, there was no part of me that could consciously let this animal slowly bleed out. Even worse if somehow some zombies overhear its whining and it gets eaten alive by it or something. Okay, that scene was pretty brutal. Clem's all banged up from the dog attack, and it doesn't take too long to run into more walkers. Fortunately, she finally runs into a friendly crowd. Meet Luke and Pete, 2 survivors on their way back to a cabin not too far away.
Well, I'm Luke, and this is Pete.
Hey there.
Hi, I'm Clementine.
Luke and Pete seem to be harmless. We're not supposed to know this yet, but Luke is the GOAT. Pete's got that yeehaw survival energy and shit, they saw the dog bite. Unfortunately, neither Luke nor Pete seem to be bite experts, so the least they do is offer to take you to the hideout so that their doctor can see you and confirm you're not fixing to turn in a few hours. No amount of explaining will convince them that you got it from a dog. Instead, the game will guilt you for even hinting that you killed a dog.
So where'd this dog go? The one that did this?
What does that matter, Pete? Seriously.
I killed it.
What? Really? A dog shows up and bites you and you just kill it?
What would you have done?
I don't know.
It attacked me.
Still, you don't kill dogs.
What happened to the dog? Well, I killed the dog. You killed the dog? How dare you? Who kills dogs? Says the game that just made me kill a dog. Actions have consequences, my dick and balls. I didn't want to kill that dog, Telltale. Before Clementine can even make it to the base, we're reminded why she was being carried in the first place. Oh boy, here we go. Time to meet the gang. We've already met Pete and Luke, and it seems to be that Pete's actually the one calling the shots. The second country fella here pointing a gun straight at us is Nick. He's Pete's nephew and is kinda dumb. Rebecca is the pregnant lady who really wants to shoot Clementine in the face. That's Alvin, Rebecca's husband, and that's pretty much as far as it goes with his character, if I'm being totally honest. And that's Carlos, the group doctor. And last, off in the distance, we see a girl, Sarah, peeking out of the cabin. Carlos isn't able to pinpoint what that bite is, so they decide to leave Clementine in the cabin overnight, without even treating her wound. Some doctor you are, what do you mean you can't treat my wound? Now, I've never been bitten by a dog before, especially not to the point where Clementine's skin is literally falling off. I get it, Carlos. You know, you're not a forensics expert. You don't do autopsies, but bro, I'm not dead yet. What happened to your Hippocratic oath? More like hypocritical oath. You know what I'm saying? We can appeal to someone here, but it doesn't matter. We have to spend the night alone to prove we're not going to turn. Thanks for nothing, Luke.
Maybe you could get me some supplies?
I wish I could. I really do, but it's too risky. Sorry.
How is Clementine supposed to sleep in this dinky-ass, nasty, ratchet-ass cabin with her arm torn off? That's gotta be full frontal pain at every possible moment. Instead, we have to go through the sequence where we sneak into the cabin to fix her arm. That's all she wants to do, is fix her fucking arm.
They have a doctor. He's gotta have stuff for stitches.
I like this moment. It makes sense. You know, I know that you know that we both know that Clementine got bit by a dog, not a zombie. So it makes total sense for her to sneak out of this cabin to do everything possible to at least cure the wound before it gets actually infected. The irony here is the fact that Carlos seems to think that the only clue that Clementine will have if she's turning is if she gets a fever. But I'm pretty sure getting infected normally also gives you a fever. So the clue that they're leveraging, you know, waiting to see if Clementine gets a fever from an infected bite, like zombie infected, is end up going to be masked by her getting an actual infection, normal infection, instead. They'll Glock her right on the spot, thinking she'd be turning and be none the wiser. What a bunch of tools. Act now, consequences later. Let's just find what we need and fix up our arm. Sneaking through the house isn't really all that difficult. It's not a stealth section, alright? You hold W, you go from one place to another. It's a Telltale game, alright? Frankly, a lot of this game still feels like it's barely a video game, but that's kind of par for the course for adventure games, so not going to spend that much time on this. This is not a gameplay video. No matter what you do, you'll always get caught by Sarah and finally be formally introduced to her.
Hi. Can you please help me? I'm not supposed to talk to you. My dad can't know.
Sarah's an interesting character. It's not hard to figure out that Sarah represents a parallel version of Clementine. One that's managed to stay relatively sheltered away from the horrors of the real world. At this point of the game, you might be thinking, has Sarah even seen a walker? Later in the game, you'll see that she has, but she's got no survival instincts. She's friendly though, and immediately hands Clementine the peroxide she needs to disinfect her wound. No persuasion necessary. She just wants a friend.
Now the fun part.
Clem heads back to the shed, and we get another cringe-inducing sequence with Clementine slowly and painfully sewing her arm back together. The yelling causes her to attract the walker, and we get our final action sequence of this episode in a one-on-one showdown. One thing that's made painfully clear in this moment is just how much effort it takes Clementine to take out just one zombie. We saw earlier in the episode when we were still with Sam. This zombie right here, tied to a tree, immobile, not even that aggressive, and yet it takes Clementine hit after hit with a log just to finish it off. Now Clementine is facing off against a fully grown man zombie in super tight quarters with a fucked up arm, and it still takes her hit after hit in the head with a hammer to kill the thing. Clementine's a badass. She's already using her surroundings to her advantage in this moment right here, but it's night and day compared to Lee, who could whack zombies in one hit. He wasn't a human tank by any means, but he could still kill him with one hit fairly easily. It's the first thing he does when he meets Clementine, actually. For her, it takes multiple, basically free hits just to break their skull. It's rotten, spongy skull. All this to say, the cards are kind of stacked against 11-year-olds, aren't they? The folks inside the cabin were able to hear the noise, thank God. They agree that Clementine should be showing signs of a fever by now if she was really infected with a zombie disease, so they let her in.
His nails.
Are you all right?
I'm still not bitten. I never was.
We get a warm moment with Luke and Nick here, and also get a chance to see the true, hidden final boss of The Walking Dead Season 2. I've chosen to dub it Evil Clementine. There are moments in The Walking Dead Season 2 where you get to do legitimately bad things, immoral things, jeopardizing the lives of other people for your own or your tribe's personal gain. Evil Clementine is another story entirely. Evil Clementine is exactly as it sounds. With Nick and Luke, I chose to be nice, forgiving, thankful for being back in the cabin.
Hey, look. I just want to say I'm sorry for being a dick out there. I got kind of aggro, and that was definitely not cool.
You were just protecting your friends. I get it.
With Carlos and Rebecca, Evil Clementine makes her first cameo appearance.
But there are a few things you need to know about my daughter.
Okay.
She isn't like you. You may not get that initially, but once you're around her for a while, you'll understand. If she knew how bad the world is, what it's really like out there, she would cease to function.
She needs to grow up sometime.
You do not know what she needs.
I wouldn't get comfortable if I were you.
Whose baby is it?
Excuse me?
If it's not Alvin's, whose is it?
Let it be okay. Let it be his.
You shut your fucking mouth.
Sass mode engaged. Damn! Evil Clementine has no sympathy for the weak. The next morning, we're off to fish with Pete and Nick. We get a wholesome 100 moment here with Pete as we talk about his awkward relationship with Nick. They're supposed to be uncle and nephew, but based just from the way they talk about each other, it's definitely morphed into a father and son dynamic. There's clearly some tension here about something we don't really know much about. Why are things so awkward? Regardless of the answer, the DNA of the first game makes its way into this one too. It doesn't matter that they're not related. Pete has found a son in Nick, and Nick's found a father in Pete. We'll be seeing a lot of this throughout the game, and obviously throughout the rest of the series.
Sometimes you gotta play a role, even if it means people you love hate you for it.
You should tell him that.
Come on, did you really expect we'd go out fishing and that's that? We'd catch some fish, call it a day, eat some sushi for dinner? No. No, shit happens. There's been a shootout, and we don't know who the winners are, or where they are, but we do find the losers. The boys have found some dead bodies by the stream, and a not-so-dead body. Do we give this not-so-dead body a final glass of water before their demise? That's choice number 4, if you're counting. I'm not even sure why this is such a major choice. The literal second after you make it, it's cast aside like nothing happens. Never brought up again. Did you give this man water? And of course, before he even gets a chance to say or do anything important, we're interrupted by the zombie horde that was probably attracted to this place when the shootout happened. Not that we, the humans, ever heard that shootout ourselves, but whatever, it's just a game, it's a game like usual. The group is accosted by a small horde of walkers, and here we go. Just like in the end of episode 1, back in the pharmacy, our final truly major choice of the game is to either save Nick or to save Pete. So who do you choose? Pete's been a cool guy. He's been advocating for Clementine since we met him, before Luke.
Look, I don't know what the hell took a bite out of her, but still, she's just a kid. Worst case, she turns, and we can deal with it.
Nick pointed a gun at us. He's a loose cannon. He apologized, sure, but he's no Pete. Nick has got to go.
I didn't mean to be so harsh. We had a bad experience once.
Yeah, I chose to save Nick. Which I realize now, in hindsight, that it would be an unpopular decision, and holy cow, 40% of people saved Nick. Damn. This is not nearly as close as Doug and Carly was. This is a very clear democratic preference. Okay, well, did I at least make an interesting choice? Even back with Doug and Carly, we ended up with one of those two characters for an extra pair of chapters. So what happens here? I chose wrong? Wait, hold on. This was the wrong choice? So it turns out if you pick Nick, Nick survives and Pete dies. Okay, that makes sense. But if you pick Pete, then Nick still survives and Pete survives. What the fuck?
Nick! Hold on! Nick! God damn it! Nick!
This is kind of misleading, okay? Sure, Pete lives long enough for the beginning of Chapter 2, but he actually died shortly after from the same bite that actually justified my picking of Nick. But at first glance, this makes the choice between Nick and Pete seem objective. You're going to start thinking that the Pete choice is the only right one to go through. This is a choice just to pick who your favorite cowboy is, not who you want to save. Given that knowledge, I probably would have picked Pete too, just to spend a little bit more time with him. You'll get to spend more time with Nick regardless because, again, he survives this whole ordeal no matter what you do, but it's Pete who's on borrowed time. It's one of those few moments in Telltale's The Walking Dead where it does feel like your choices mattered because you get a little bit more context to the story, context you'd never see if you chose the opposite decision. Does it affect the overall story? No. Pete and Nick's fates are sealed in ink, or in this case, code. Spending a few extra minutes with one or the other won't save them from their fates, but it does personalize your playthrough in ways that feel like a small deviation from, say, a friend's playthrough or a YouTuber that you watched. It also says a lot about who you are, which is something that I brought up in the last game's video, the idea of choices being an intrinsically personal moment, not a narrative moment. Not something to cause an action or deviation in the story, but a moment to stop and think. What would you do in this situation? With very little time to think. Either way, that's episode 1. It does a great job setting up all that we're about to see in the rest of the game. The most important, as far as it relates to gameplay anyway, is that your decisions matter. You could end up with a different ending even within these episodes depending on your choices throughout the game. But more so than tangible gameplay-related choices, The Walking Dead is already setting you up for some short-sighted decisions that our cast of characters have made long before you've met them. Carlos's strange decision to overprotect Sarah, will it bite him in the ass? Rebecca's weird relationship with this mystery villain Carver, will that come back again later? Playing fetch with a dog over and over and over again, will he ever be my friend? No. The answer to that last one was no anyway. But everything else? Maybe? Yeah? Let's just get to episode 2.
He may have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy.
Clementine and Nick speed over to a cabin in the woods to hide from the same mockers that were chasing them earlier. It's here that we get a little bit more of what Nick's all about. He's clearly all messed up from the death of Pete, but it seems like he hasn't gotten completely over another death that happened long before Clementine arrived. Totally off screen. You see, Nick had to shoot his mom. Not a zombified walker mom, he had to put down his mother before she reanimated, so it's probably fine to cut him some slack. I'm glad I forgave him back in episode 1. Despite his best efforts, Nick is still a klutz. First thing he does upon finding a cabin full of moonshine is to get as drunk as possible. I don't know why. Drink his sorrows away? Alcohol ends up being something that comes up twice in this game, including 2 decisions to partake. This first moment doesn't happen if you chose to save Pete. Nick's a klutz, alright? He's clearly unstable, juvenile, yet well-meaning. He's very similar to Ben from the last game, and Clementine even makes a nod to that in her own dialogue.
I knew someone like you. He was always screwing up too.
Screwing up? I didn't ask for any of this.
Nobody does. But so what?
Clementine manages to snap Nick out of his drunk trance, and the both of them make their escape out of the booze shed, albeit separated upon escape. Back at home base, Luke and Alvin have gone out looking for you. Carlos and Rebecca are still at the cabin and are shocked to find out about Pete. They ask you what happened. You give them the rundown, and Rebecca and Carlos go out looking for all the missing adults. Safe and sound at the cabin. Nice! We get a cute little moment with Clementine and Sarah, and you're also given a not-so-subtle nudge by Carlos to not let Sarah too into the harsh reality of the world. So you can decide whether you want to play Fantasyland with Sarah or let her into the cold hard truth, basically whenever you can. The more time we spend with Sarah hiding her from the real world, the harder it's going to be when she's forced to grow up. Hopefully, she can get that far. For every moment of peace, there's a moment of tension, and it doesn't take too long for the game to slap you in the face and present you with the big bad boss of the season. Knock knock, it's Carver.
My family and I are set up a ways downriver. I'm kind of surprised we haven't run into each other yet. What's your name?
Voiced by Michael Madsen. Neat. You're not supposed to know it yet, but this is the guy that the group has been warning you about. He's come here looking for them, and instead has found you, Clementine. This scene with Carver is surreal. It's basically a dialogue boss fight. The man just waltzes in, he's clearly looking for something, or someone, and basically ignores Clementine as he slowly interrogates her. The whole purpose of this sequence is to see how much information Carver is able to get out of you. Your goal is to hide the fact that there's a group here, the ones that he's looking for. but there's a ton of different dialogue options that could give it away. In a weird way, dialogue becomes its own QuickTime event, as you avoid trip mine after trip mine of incorrect dialogue choices that could potentially make Carver suspicious of your relationship with the people he's looking for. Obviously, this is still a Telltale game, so eventually he does snoop out that the group's been here no matter what you do or say or how effective you are, but he doesn't wear it on his face. In my playthrough, he came across a picture that I chose to take of Sarah long before I even knew this guy was coming in here, and that's what tipped him off. Carver leaves after this last part, and coincidentally, the group comes back not too long after. The immediate decision is taken to pack up our bags and go. If that really was Carver, then he's definitely onto us. Moments like these where the tension is placed wholly between human-to-human conflict rather than fist-fighting or gunslinging, it's excellent. It's so well done, it's so gripping and interesting. Just like in the first season, The Walking Dead Season 2 has started setting up a clear human threat, one that significantly outrivals that of the zombies, so much so that even Carlos is willing to put Sarah's life at risk if it means getting away from this mysterious faction.
You know these are bad people, sweetie. They will do or say anything to hurt us.
5 days pass by and the group reaches their first destination, a bridge connecting to a skiing lodge where they might be able to rest for the night. Luke decides to scout out the bridge first with Clementine before letting the rest of the group in. Nick wants to join too, but after that whole debacle in the moonshine cabin and the death of Pete, no one really wants him near danger. He could be unstable. I like these moments with just Clem and Luke. I think they really work for me in the way that they're intended, for Luke to come in as a surrogate parent for an equally important person in Clementine's life, like Lee, though obviously with his own personality and charms. You need moments like these for them to grow and like each other and have it feel natural. I found that it worked, at least for me and Luke. They get into a kerfuffle because for some reason Luke wants to walk on the shifty wooden tracks instead of like the metal bars that are holding up this rickety ass bridge, but whatever, we need some action to spice this game up. The duo does make their way through the bridge though and notice a shape in the distance. A shape with a gun. There are multiple scenes like this in The Walking Dead, and I think you can find them across other types of media too. Our protagonists are walking through a bridge or a corridor, and all of a sudden they see a stranger, and they negotiate, things seem to go well, but BAM! Betrayal. Someone gets shot. This scene pretty much plays just like that, but instead becomes the most frustrating version of them all. The guy on the other side doesn't even seem to be that bad. He offers food, he lowers his guns, we start telling jokes at each other. He's clearly not insane. And then Nick shows up out of nowhere and shoots him on sight. No hesitation. No questions asked. Just BAM!
No. He's with us. Nick! No!
Put it down!
It was at this point in the story right here that I started to get the impression that maybe we are the bad guys. Seriously, the real antagonists in this game were the friends we made along the way. Crazy.
To shoot what? Who was that guy?
He was going to help us.
How do you know?
Damn it, Nick. I told you not to shoot.
How was I supposed to hear you?
The group does manage to get their booties all the way up to the ski lodge. Luke asks Clem to look out for any signs that they're being chased, and she actually does spot some lights in the distance, but is immediately overshadowed by a commotion near the ski lodge's entrance. And look who's here, already starting some beef within the crew. When Clementine goes up to see what the commotion's about, she finds... Whoa. It's Kenny.
Kenny!
Wait, you know this guy? Clementine?
I'll take that as a yes.
Time for a history lesson. The Walking Dead Season 1 released its first episode in 2011 to much critical and commercial acclaim. It got so much attention when it first released, it was practically impossible not to at least get a glimpse of it. The strange, stocky animations, the distinct comic book style graphic design, all during the height of the zombie craze that took over entertainment media in the late 2000s, all coming together during a time when gamers were starting to spend more time watching other people play video games than playing those games themselves. It's a lot cheaper, you know? Not only is this still Telltale's most successful video game ever, it's also the most successful adventure game, period. Full stop. To put it into comparison, the first season sold about as much as Elden Ring, Pokemon Sword and Shield, and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Mega hits from some of the biggest companies on the planet. But what's extra impressive is all that prestige that came along with that financial success. Suddenly, mainstream video games could be more than just gamey games, with multiplayer, violence, and high scores. Games could say something worth tuning into, emotional and interactive. The Walking Dead was already a hit, but now I could directly participate in the zombie apocalypse myself, make my own decisions, give my own take on how to survive. It was perfect. Literally made for success. All this glizzy glazing takes me to my point. When a sequel is announced, aimed at being the successor to that first adventure, with Clementine as the playable protagonist, you could imagine that people got excited. The prospect of more Walking Dead was met with hype. And when this game first released, this one right here, is probably the one that folks remember the most. Seeing Kenny again, almost 2 years after the first game had been released. Now that was special. If you were happy at seeing this man again, you deserve to be. In a series with a lot of low blows and a lot of gut punches, this is a rare high. I mean, it's Kenny, dude. We know this guy. He's our friend. He's Lee's bestest friend. We saw him at his highest. We've seen him at his lowest. We can trust him. If there's anyone in this entire game that we can trust, it's Kenny. Right?
Still wearing this dirty old thing, huh? You know, I half expected to see Lee walk up next to you. You guys were like two peas in a pod.
Kenny's back, and he's hairy. A friend of Clementine is a friend to us. The squad is invited in the cabin where they find working electricity, food, and fucking Christmas, man. Fuck. You already know something is about to go wrong when the things get wholesome out of nowhere.
Kenny and Sarita have been staying with us for several weeks. Used to be a ski lodge, obviously, so we have plenty of food. And believe it or not, we still get some power from that wind turbine out front.
Kenny found himself a new girl, Sarita. Look at you. Alongside Sarita is Walter, who's just an all-around nice dude. Turns out that Walter is like a history teacher. He's clearly still a little naive, but generally means well. From Walter, we also find out about another guest at the lodge, a young fella not too dissimilar to the guy Nick shot on the bridge. Oh, wait, shit. Yeah, that's Walter's partner, and I ain't talking partners in crime for the Nintendo DS. I'm talking romance. And because of Nick and our crew, this romance is more like a no-mance. Just to prove how great of a guy Walter is, we go through this whole section where the guy almost fucking Joker snaps on Nick. And depending on our choices, he can forgive him. Seriously, we can convince Walter to forgive Nick, and doing so saves his life. There's gonna be a zombie attack in a few minutes, and if we throw Nick under the bus, Walter can get Nick killed. He can just genuinely die in this episode as a result of our decisions. The second game did try to give you some nuggets of agency. Certain characters can die earlier than the plot requires them to, and it can be your fault. What sucks is that the plot needs them to die. If it sounds like Nick dies no matter what you do, that's because it's true. It's like Harley and Doug. One of the two will survive longer than the other, but eventually both of their lucks will run out, through no fault of your own. Despite everything Nick did, Walter still manages to see the good in Nick and forgives him for shooting Matthew by saving his life. But it's Clementine who helps him make that decision. Imagine if Nick had shot Sarita by accident. You really think Kenny would have forgiven Nick? Do you? Walter's just the best. The Christmas party get-together is a nice break from the doom and gloom and is the only one we're going to get for a while, so pucker up, Buttercup. But it's partly due to how slow it is that makes this section kind of boring. Maybe it's the fact that I really wanted to talk to Kenny, spend some more time with him, but the game couldn't help but separate the two of you the second it could. You walk around, talk to all the new characters, put a star on a tree, get a quick history lesson from Walter, make up with Rebecca. I need death. You! Who are you? Oh wait, shit, it's Bonnie from the DLC. Is it worth talking about the DLC? No, it's not. Bonnie is clearly caught spying into the lodge, but because we didn't take anyone from the new crew to walk around the lodge, we've got no idea that she's part of Carver's squad, and anybody else would probably recognize Bonnie if they saw her right here. We can be nice to Bonnie here and offer some help, but say it with me now, it doesn't matter. Shit! The light's off. There appears to be a giant-ass wind turbine making a whole lot of noise. Clementine, why don't you fucking fix it? You're an engineer, right? So what do we actually do to stop the turbine, besides letting an 11-year-old do all the work for us? We make a whole lot more noise to kill all the zombies approaching from the forest. Great idea! Wastes all our bullets, nearly gets ourselves killed, and we scramble across the compound just in time for the real threat to show up. so we're separated and low on ammo. Just great strategy, guys. These adults know what they're doing. This is where Walter can kill Nick, by the way, so we finally caught up to that nonsense. God damn it. Here they are. They found us. Those lights from earlier, Bonnie scouting ahead, this was all Carver and his goons. And now they're here. So this guy really was Carver after all. The leader of their group was just scouting on his own? That doesn't seem right. Well, anyway, he's lining everyone up and is threatening to shoot our new friends if Rebecca doesn't reveal herself. We can choose to try to sneak out and find Kenny and Luke, who were out killing zombies before these guys walked in and gave ourselves up, but it's kind of unsubstantial. No matter what you do, Clementine will eventually have to give herself up to Carver. Someone on Carver's side will die, and Carver shoots Walter in retaliation. Damn. Okay, man. What the flip? Then Carver decides he's going to shoot his competition. Rebecca was worried about her baby not being Alvin's earlier, so it turns out that the father might be Carver, and he seems to be happy to claim it as is. If you choose to go find Kenny instead of leading Rebecca out in the open, then Carver does shoot Alvin. He dies right here in Chapter 2 with nothing to show for it. If you decide to go with Alvin and Rebecca, then Clementine gets held hostage. Then Kenny decides to give himself up. Episode 2 concludes with tragedy, once again, but depending on your choices, your squad might still be at least up an Alvin and a Nick. Or they could both be dead. Episode 2 ends on that note, solidifying the first episode's introduction of its own major characters and merging them with this new group. A third party interrupts, and now you're stuck between a rock and a hard place trying to figure out who's who, where's where, and who your next daddy is going to be. That's right, guys. It's daddy game time. Welcome back to Who's Your Daddy, the game show all about finding that father figure in your own life. Behind each door is Clementine's true father figure, so let's see who's it going to be, shall we? Behind door number 1, we've got a charismatic smooth talker. He's handsome. He's young. Give it up for Luke.
That's going to leave one hell of a scar.
Behind door number 2 is a man with daddy energy beyond belief. He's tough. He's gruff. He's got a sweet beard and an even sweeter heart. You know him. You love him. Give it up for Kenny.
What? No speaking of English?
Behind door number 3 is an unexpected third entry. He's got the brains. He's got the bronze. We've known him since day 1. Give it up for... Ouch. Too soon? I like to compare the Walking Dead games to other notable daddy games like The Last of Us. But in my last video, I did highlight how much this element, this theme about a father taking care of a child, and how well that resonates with this particular game, on selling me on the responsibility you have to your protectee, your sacred person. I may have been a teeny bit cynical about how much better The Walking Dead does it, so it's definitely a subjective opinion. But I do stand by this being my favorite of the bunch, because many of the game's choices allow you to develop the child you're supposed to be rearing. You know, Ellie, Elizabeth, Atreus, all of these end up the same person no matter how you play through their games. And if you eventually get to Season 2, the same can be said about Clementine. You know, she's not necessarily any different based on what you've done in that first game. But if you take that isolated first chapter of this entire franchise and cut it apart from the rest of the game, then you do end up with a different Clementine by the game's end. You've solidified your relationship with her, and she throws that outcome right back at you. Can she pull the trigger or let you succumb to the zombification? It all depends on how you treated her and whether or not you even let her make that choice at all. The Walking Dead Season 2 might not look like a daddy game because you play as Clementine, but the presence of father figures never goes away. In the later games, you'll start to see that idea of you being the protector come back, but in Season 2, it's you being protected. Though if we're being honest, Clementine kind of has to lift up everybody by their bootstraps the whole time, but we're gonna talk about that. Just in episode 1, we saw the importance of Pete within his new group, but more so in his relationship with Nick. He's not his father, he's his uncle, but he still plays the role of a father. This isn't anything new, right? Booker and Kratos might be directly related to their kids, but Lee and Joel? The two I would argue are the most effective at selling the father-daughter dynamic. They're not even closely related to their daughters. Despite this, Clementine does have to continue depending on adults to make her way through the apocalypse, and in Game 2, Lee has been totally replaced by a multitude of caretakers. There's a secret third that hasn't been introduced yet, but at the moment, Luke and Kenny are going to fit that bill. They couldn't be more different. Luke is this new character. Kenny is an old classic. Luke is younger, bolder. He's more prone to mistakes than Kenny is, but they tend to be harmless by comparison. Kenny's mistakes are usually bound by stubbornness and experience, and at the same time, you know who Kenny is. So from the get-go, you probably trust him more than you do Luke. But we really haven't seen what Luke is capable of. What did he do to get Carver so pissed off? What could Kenny ever do to make you want to dump his ass? It's all very interesting, and this dynamic becomes core to the entire game. Who's Your Daddy isn't just a stupid gag for this video. It is The Walking Dead Season 2. And daddies are coming from every direction. Pause. I already talked about Pete and Luke, but we've also got Alvin, who could be directly related to Rebecca's baby. We don't know yet, and neither do they, but he's still willing to raise this child as his own. It's not even born yet. Carlos and Sarah couldn't be closer. They clearly love each other. They depend on each other. But it ends up being retroactively harmful to Sarah, so we get to see different dynamics and different nuances in this father-daughter relationship in Season 2 that we just never really got to see in that first game. All at the same time, we've got this villain, Carver, who's also claiming to be the father of Rebecca's baby. In this parallel zombie adventure, we've got people running around looking for babies to raise. That's like the total opposite of what Joel wanted to happen with Ellie. Carver himself has a particularly unique perspective on this issue. We won't get this sequence until episode 3, but it's worth bringing up now.
I realized it back in that cabin. You were scared, but you looked me straight in the eye, kept your nerve. That's what we need if we're gonna get through this. The next generation has to be stronger than the last to lead us out of this. Kids like you, raised the right way. The way my child will be raised. It ain't this herd that keeps me up at night. We can handle that. It's not knowing if I got anyone to hand all this off to. But I ain't worried about that anymore.
What if it's not yours?
Well, even if that was true, it's mine now.
Carver sees the youth. He sees you, Rebecca's child, hell, even Sarah, as the true inheritors of the zombie apocalypse. Kids can't afford to be meek or weak in a world with zombies. Carver firmly believes that if we raise every kid like Carlos raises his, we're going to start seeing humanity being wiped out. He rules with an iron fist, ultimately for the greater good, but still flawed in execution. It's also a flaw, then, in my opinion, that there's really no way to recognize some of these aspects of his philosophy. Don't get me wrong, Carver is an evil dude, bordering on the fascistic, but I'd argue that even the game itself wants you to understand that survival isn't just about finding food and aiming for the head. You've got to be tough, and sometimes, you've got to be bad.
Are we the baddies?
Episode 3 sees the crew taken, all the way back to Carver's home base. Technically, this is the second time most of our crew make their way back here, but for Clementine and Kenny's group, this will all be new. Carver's gang has made a home out of this massive department store. There's food, water, electricity, and indentured servitude. Right out of the gate, we meet Reggie, a fellow survivor and prisoner. He was part of the group that made their escape from Carver's gang, but unlike Luke, Rebecca, and Carlos, Reggie got himself caught.
They got me working outside. Lurker snuck up on me while I was hammering something. Luckily, they took the arm off quick. Saved my life.
Hey, I know that voice anywhere. That's celebrity guest cameo Kumail Nanjiani. Funny hearing his voice here. Anyway, Reggie's mostly comedic relief. Though there is some weird tension with his missing arm. He claims to have lost it during a zombie bite that forced an amputation, but it wouldn't be complete fantasy to believe that maybe this was punishment for his making an escape. Maybe that might even happen to one of us here. Kenny is particularly anxious to get out of the prison. We haven't even heard what Carver's planning to do to us before Clementine is voluntold to scout the place, which unfortunately gets Reggie in trouble.
Clementine, please. I asked really nicely. I don't want to...
What the hell is she doing?
No, nothing. You know, kids. They love not listening.
You had one job, Reggie. This is real disappointing. Gonna have to tell Bill about this.
Please, come on.
Hey, don't be like that, man.
Carver's prison is probably not the worst place on the planet right now with all the fucking zombies. It's safe, there's plenty of renewable food and water, and there's shelter and a place to sleep so long as you work all day against your will. Guys, are we sure this is a prison? This sounds more like Carver lays down the law before it's time for sleep. So long as we work hard day in, day out, we'll be fed, dressed, protected, and potentially promoted to guard status. What a charmer! The next morning, we get a chance to catch up with Bonnie from yesterday. She's remorseful over the whole betrayal switcheroo from last chapter, but we do get an opportunity here to forgive her, not forgive her. Doesn't matter. She apparently also considered escaping with Luke and the gang, but unlike Reggie, she never joined the group in the first place, which is why she's still got a cushy guard position, and Reggie is missing a whole arm.
I was supposed to go. When Luke and Carlos and all them left, I was planning on leaving too. When Luke approached me about it, I thought he was crazy. I mean, we're safe here. We got power, we got food.
Why didn't you leave, I mean?
If I'm being honest, I guess I chickened out.
Once we're done with Bonnie, we help Reggie and Sarah pick some berries from the greenhouse. Earlier, when Carver was laying down the law, he forces Carlos to slap the shit out of Sarah for speaking out of turn. That comes back here, when Sarah, completely out of her element, refuses to figure out how to learn to cut her own berries. We get a major choice here to either do her portion of the berries for her, or leave her to her own quantity. Whatever choice you pick, Carver comes back to check on you and punishes Reggie for failing to get the two of us to do our work. Seems like this was the last straw too. Reggie doesn't even get the chance to throw us under the bus before Carver throws him off the roof, sending Reggie straight to his death.
You plenty of chances.
Bill! No! 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 Please! Ah!
Weakness, incompetence. It puts us all at risk, and it won't be tolerated. You think about that the next time you're asked to do something.
Reggie dies on impact, convincing Clementine that no matter what Carver might be promising, this place is definitely worse than the wilderness. And who could blame her? Reggie basically got killed off for no reason. Well, maybe not for no reason. This is now the fourth friendly character whose death may or may not be directly our fault, depending on your perspective. The fault clearly lies with Carver. I mean, he's a total psycho, but I wouldn't blame you if you even felt a tiny pang of guilt for Reggie's death. I think that's intentional. Reggie's death ends up becoming a small catalyst for our escape. Even the guards seem to be on edge, thinking Carver's gone too far this time, though they don't intend to switch sides anytime soon.
It's crazy about Reggie, huh?
Yeah.
You think Bill...
Go on.
Nah, it's just... I was wondering if you thought Bill maybe...
Spit it out, Hank.
I don't think Bill was gonna let him back in.
I want to emphasize that I don't get the impression that this faction is completely evil. Nobody here outside Carver can even really be considered a villain. They're all meant to be antagonists to the player, you know? Especially compared to the cannibals from Season 1. This was a much smaller faction, but were morally evil with a capital E. Carver's crew? They're just trying to survive, you know, same as us. After Reggie's death, we help Kenny and one of the other prisoners, Mike, with reinforcing some of the windows in the warehouse. Shit goes south nearly instantly, though. Can't go through an episode of The Walking Dead without any other dead people walking around, you know what I'm saying? On the way back, we're snatched by Luke. He's alive! And he's here? How the fuck did he get inside the warehouse? This is kind of contrived, though I guess maybe Luke knows an easy way in and out from being an ex-member and all, but I don't know. It doesn't really make a lot of sense with all the guards and shit. Either way, I'm still glad to see you, Luke. Good news, Luke's already hatched a plan. He wants me to get him one of the radios so we can communicate and organize another escape. Hello, team? Where's the agency? Where's the responsibility? You guys are supposed to be the grown-ups.
Thanks, Clem. I'm so glad I can count on you.
The last thing we do today is we get summoned by Carver to have a quick one-on-one. If Alvin is still alive, we finally get to see what he's been up to, and it's not looking good. This is where Carver gives us that rundown on his whole philosophy. The strong must rule over the weak. Our future generations must survive without us. It's comic book villain speech with a twang of sympathy because we've already seen what a world with naivete looks like in The Walking Dead. Never mind the real world. It almost feels like Carver is apologizing in the scene in his own way. I mean, besides Sarah, you're the only witness to Reggie's death, so while Carver isn't explicitly apologizing or begging for forgiveness, you could see this as a more of a threatening angle. Let's keep it under wraps and see what happens if you're one of the weak ones. This conversation does come off as a way to peer into Carver's mind one last time before our grand escape.
He didn't deserve that. Even if he messed up, he didn't deserve to die.
Oh, he certainly did. You see, Reggie put us at risk with his incompetence. He's had a string of screw-ups lately. Killing one in order to save many is part of survival. It's one of the tough decisions that a weaker person couldn't make. It's why it falls to people like us to lead them to safety.
Clementine manages to get her hands on a radio and even has the chance to let Bonnie in on the plan. Should we trust her? Regardless of your choice, Luke is not at the meetup spot. You find Troy instead, the resident asshole guard. Luke is instead captured by Carver. We get a showdown here where Carver demands to have that second missing radio. We can try to speak up and take the blame, but Kenny blocks us off.
2.
I
got it right here.
And I mean, he really tanks it. Carver does not let in. He smashes Kenny's eye with the radio, permanently damaging it. We're getting out of here, and we're getting out of here tonight. It's here we're more formally introduced to Jane. Jane is going to end up being one of the most important characters of this game, but for now, she's just a scrappy, lone survivor with knowledge on the best ways to survive the apocalypse. The crew concocts a plan to smear zombie guts all over us, attract an incoming horde, then sneak out as though we were the zombies, while the actual walkers distract the guards. Clem backs up Jane's plan pretty quick because, hello, we've played these games before. Back in the final sequence of Season 1, it's one of those golden rules of the Walking Dead verse. Smelling and walking like a zombie makes you invisible to them. Clem's role in this escape is to sneak into Carver's office to turn the music on, blast it all over the sound system and attracting the local horde, so that we can all escape unseen.
Why is it always me?
Success! But fuck, Alvin is in no position to make the escape with you, and frankly, it doesn't look like he really wants to escape. In a last-ditch effort to give Clementine some more time, Alvin sacrifices his life to take down the only guard Carver sends in to turn off the music, thus delaying his relief plans and forcing the music to stay on for the whole escape. Alvin dies in the process, hoping, almost knowingly, that his child is born a girl, maybe as strong as Clementine. Back with the rest of the squad, we find that Carver has finally been cornered. We got a major choice here to witness Carver's fate. By now, Alvin is confirmed dead, so Rebecca is very ready to see Carver's death through, and Kenny is now missing an eye because of Carver's dictatorship. Everybody else is pretty much ready to get out of here with or without Carver, but Clementine has the choice here to see what happens to him face to face. This is the type of choice that I think works best in these games. They're low impact, but they say completely different things about the character we're playing, about who we are, the player behind the screen. Ditching Kenny and going with the rest of the crew feels like the right thing to do, but staying with Kenny in solidarity with him and Alvin and Rebecca and Reggie also feels completely justifiable. In this moment right here, we see her for a moment. We see the Clementine that this girl could become, or in reality, the one that she does become. Even for a moment. She's tough, brave, but also cold, almost inhuman. Maybe the Walking Dead are the friends we made along the way. Wink, wink. The crew finally makes their way out with the help of Bonnie. Jane takes out that asshole guard Troy, and it's off to the races, zombie guts and all. Easy does it. Careful, no sudden movements. Oh, no. Uh-oh. A stray bullet from the guards firing at the horde hits Carlos right in the neck and gets him killed right in front of Sarah. All hell breaks loose. In the commotion, Sarah bolts it in some random direction. We see Sarita struggling with a zombie that's clearly got his face all up in her arms, and we get the final but quick decision to either aim for the zombie or aim for the arm. Now, I don't know if this is a camera focus thing, the fact that the arm is right in the middle of the screen, and maybe we couldn't see that we could actually aim for the zombie head, but most players, including myself, went with the choice that felt the most obvious, cutting her arm straight clean through. As usual, this rash split-second decision may not have been a well-thought-out one. We don't get to see what happens to Sarita right this second because the episode ends right there as she lets out another scream. Episode 3, finito. Wow, okay, so a lot happens in Episode 3. Beyond just death and destruction, we get introduced to the final list of important characters, the ones worth talking about anyway. Kenny and Luke are thoroughly humbled in this episode, proving once again that Clementine's the true carry of the squad.
Alright, well then what now?
We've finally gotten rid of Carver, the only villain in this game so far, but we've lost a lot of our friends along the way. Carlos, Alvin, potentially Nick, are all confirmed dead by this point. Sarita is probably dead too, and who knows where Sarah could have run off to. Episode 3 is siloed entirely in this department store, a safe house that works more as a forced labor camp. It was around Episode 3 that I started asking myself if Clementine and her group were really the good guys in this whole operation. Carver is a bad motherfucker, sure, but aside from his brutality and cruelty, this place is an excellent place to hole up and seek shelter. Clementine and her group organize an escape that ends up completely wrecking this place. All those other survivors and guards who haven't really done anything to us, all the food security that came along with it, everything is gone overnight. Was such a quick and harsh escape really our only course of action? Think about the earlier episodes too, like Nick's instant one-tap of Matthew, or how Pete and Luke were so quick to ditch an injured child in the middle of the woods, or how Alvin selfishly begs Clementine to hide some food away for Rebecca.
That's funny. She looks just like you.
Mostly joking about that last one, but the evidence starts to pile up when you start to think about it. Are we really the good guys? Obviously, y'all, I'm making a big deal out of this because that's part of the game, alright? Something that this game is trying to make so clear is that, despite my gags about evil Clementine, that need to maybe bend the rules a little bit to make sure we all live in the end, starts to become more important and more prevalent in the story and in the world of The Walking Dead. The ends justify the means. Part of growing up in the Walking Dead verse is also to let go of rights and wrongs. Our protagonists usually stand in the side of justice, but this game has Clementine consider some pretty heinous shit, and rarely do we get a chance to reconcile with those decisions. There's one in episode 4 that's pretty in your face. So is Nick's killing of Matthew, but nobody thinks twice about flooding the warehouse with zombies in order to escape. Nobody seems to give a shit about Reggie, and nobody thinks twice about locking up a child in cold, damp tool sheds with an arm half torn off. The Clementine we create in this game is going to have to adapt to the world around her. This messaging was here all the way back with Lee, but here, it comes out in full force, because we do get some agency into what Clementine can and can't do. Does she watch Carver get beaten to death? Does she try to help Sarah survive the apocalypse? Does she care more about herself or the group? Clementine can make some bad choices, and I think it's to Telltale's credit, even if they may not ultimately affect the outcome of the story, that they do make the player hesitate. It's a theme that's present from beginning to end, and will ultimately define the Clementine we see in Season 4, because spoiler alert, Clementine makes it pretty far in these games. The same cannot be said about our hardy crew.
Do this?
Yes.
There ain't one part of that son of a bitch I don't hate, but that does not make this right.
Episode 4 starts right here, where Episode 3 ends. The consequences of either cutting Sarita's arm or aiming for the zombies' heads are immediately laid bare when she's either mauled by the group of walkers or is able to make a quick escape, albeit with a bitten arm. Already we get another choice where the outcome feels one-sided. Of course cutting her arm off will have her scream in pain and shock, only for all the zombies to swarm her practically instantly. That said, Sarita doesn't make it very far if you didn't cut her arm off. She dies moments later after being mercy killed by Kenny. I chose to cut her arm off, most players did. It feels like that's the choice the game wanted you to make, an incredibly difficult choice to make in a very, very tense and tight situation. Except, it sucks that it leads to nowhere. In fact, Kenny admonishes you live in 4K, and suddenly the zombies stop paying attention to you, while everyone's yapping during Sarita's death. Yeah, I don't know. This part is a little awkward. It doesn't happen if you didn't cut Sarita's arm, so I'm not sure what else to say besides pointing it out. You don't have to put Sarita down here, but anything you do pisses off Kenny for the rest of the episode. It's like Clementine walked up and shot Katja in the face. This is not the same Kenny that hugged you 2 episodes ago. Shortly after you split up with Kenny, you find Rebecca and Jane. Together, you make your escape using a zombie as bait. This was a technique Michonne used in the comics and in the TV show to keep the walkers off her. She not only smelled like a zombie, she had a couple as bait to blend in even better. Made her look like a total badass, by the way. Together, you make your way through the rendezvous at a nearby Civil War museum. The only survivors at the meeting place are Bonnie, Mike, and Kenny. And Kenny is mega pissed. There's really nothing you can do about it, so you and Jane head off to a local trailer park to see if you can find any other survivors. It's time for some R&R with Jane. From this point on, The Walking Dead Season 2 is as much Jane's story as it is Clementine's, Kenny's, and Luke's. This daddy game has introduced a motherly curveball, and in my opinion, Jane's role in the story ends up being just as valid as any of the other parental figures in Clementine's life. Jane comes in relatively late into this story though, and as we'll find out in episode 5, essentially replaces one of our 2 daddies from earlier. It's safe to say that Jane is probably this game's most controversial character outside of maybe Kenny. Ultimately, the fact that these 2 end up being so contentious, both in and out of the game, makes me think Telltale knew what they were cooking for this game's ending. Jane introduces a major ideology in the world of The Walking Dead, and maybe even any post-apocalyptic style genre, game, film, book, whatever.
That group is cracking. I've seen it before. And, well, a lot of times, it's better to be on your own.
You see, Jane's a loner. She likes to survive without the burden of other people to care for. This acts against pretty much everything we've come to learn about The Walking Dead, including the comics and the TV shows. Though both of those mediums include characters like Jane that argue it's best to go about the zombie apocalypse solo, it doesn't end up working out so well for them here. In the video game, Jane is our second spunky young female character who's managed to make it pretty far by distancing herself from anybody else. Except this time, she's one of the main characters. This philosophy doesn't really make much sense to Clementine, as she's quick to point out, being a child and all, there's not really a lot of chance to make it this far without the help of other people, like Luke, Kenny, and obviously Lee. But given that home base currently has 3 potential liabilities just waiting to explode, it's not hard to sell ourselves into Jane's way of thinking. Now you might be thinking, 3? I counted pregnant Rebecca, I counted crazy Uncle Kenny, but who's our third? I don't remember Mike and Bonnie being all that crazy. Well, that's because our third is right here in the trailer park. Jane helps Clementine learn some tips and tricks about survival when they both overhear what appears to be the sounds of Luke and Sarah hiding out in the trailers. You know who else isn't in a good state? Nick, who after all this time finally meets his end in episode 4. All that stuff about redemption, forgiveness, are we the baddies? Over. You couldn't keep your promise to Pete. There was no reason for Matthew to die. It didn't matter that Walter forgave Nick. His story ends here. All of their narrative threads cut off right in this moment. You make your way to where Luke and Sarah are holed up, only to find that Sarah's totally paralyzed from the shock of her father's death. Almost everyone has come out of this stupid escape plan with a close loved one dead, but it looks like Sarah may be taking it worse than anybody else. Debatably. Luke has been unable to get her to move, and the zombies aren't lagging by any means. You get a choice here to slap some sense into Sarah or leave her behind. If you slap the shit out of her, which would mark the second time Sarah has been slapped in the face in back-to-back chapters, she finally gets the heart to escape the trailer with you. If you don't slap Sarah, then... Her story ends here too. God damn. The consequences of Carlos's inactions come in full force as Sarah, an innocent girl about the same age as Clementine, is pretty mercilessly devoured by a group of walkers. Youch. It's a good thing we managed to slap some sense into her. Whichever choice you end up with, you get some more perspective from Jane, though this time a bit more personal. You see, Jane had a younger sister, same age as Sarah, same age as Clementine. The two of them were pretty good at this whole survival thing till Jane's sister also lost her mind to the apocalypse, much in the same way as Sarah. She froze up, refused to budge at a crucial life and death situation.
Changed. Look, I'd seen that kind of thing before. I just didn't want to stick around for the bitter end. Sorry, I don't mean to sound harsh.
Does that mean you'd turn on me if I was hurt or something?
No, I mean, Clem, I wouldn't have to. And just because you got her out of there today, doesn't mean you saved her. Trust me. I tried to save Jamie too, but she gave up.
Jane saw her sister get ripped apart by walkers live, and that whole philosophy about surviving alone has ingrained in her ever since. It's really more of an avoidance strategy caused by trauma. Part of this game's story is helping Jane come to terms with rejoining a group, which to me feels like the right story to tell in a zombie apocalypse. Monkey together strong. Back at camp with the other survivors, you finally get a chance to talk to Kenny as a normal adult. Well, between an 11-year-old and a middle-aged adult anyway. It's also revealed that Rebecca could give birth at any moment now. Ironically, the only person here who seems to be qualified to help with Rebecca's birth is Kenny of all people. I say ironic because usually in these types of stories, a woman is usually drawn from the crowd and made to be a wet nurse to help deliver the baby in an emergency. Instead, it's Kenny, emotionally unstable, socially withdrawn, deeply mournful Kenny who saves the day. Meanwhile, you and the rest of the gang split up to scout the surrounding region for a better place to hide out while the baby arrives. You actually get to pick what to do here first in a rare moment of narrative agency. The order of events doesn't matter, you end up doing both in full, but you can choose to go with Mike and Bonnie first or with Jane first. Let's just switch things up and go with Mike and Bonnie. We haven't learned much about in this game. At this point in the story, our group has an amalgamation of like 5 different factions. We've met Jane, Mike, and Bonnie at the same place, but they weren't bound to each other when we first met. But they are our newest character group. Sarah, Luke, and Rebecca are the only ones left from the original cabin crew, and Kenny is the only one left from the ski lodge group. Then there's you, Clementine. The constant loss has really shaken up those 2 earlier squads, but Mike and Bonnie still seem to be holding up relatively well. They find a broken up museum nearby where they pick up some water and a coat for Rebecca to lay on.
I'm stuck.
Okay, maybe I push from...
Once that's done, you get to join Jane for an excursion in a local tourist booth. While she's trying to get the place open, you see a stranger approach from the distance. This is Arvo, and he is Rajan. Arvo has a ton of meds for some reason. Why is bro carrying a bag full of meds? It almost looks like he's leaving these meds in random locations for survivors to find. That's not what he says he's doing, though. Apparently, his sister is sick, so he needs as many drugs as he can find. You have the option of robbing him blind here. This is to me the most direct example of are we the baddies yet? But unlike helping Sarah over the course of the game, you really can rob Arvo blind here. No matter what you do, Jane will at least steal Arvo's gun away, so you can't really escape the robber allegations that might be coming anyway. Once you've knocked out these 2 little escapades with Jane and Mike and Bonnie, the final sequence of the chapter commences. But not before you catch Jane and Luke canoodling at the tourist booth.
That was about as human as I've felt in a long time. I almost forgot what... Clementine!
Alright, playa, that's what I'm talking about! While the rest of the crew berate Luke for getting it on, the endless zombie horde that randomly attacks our crew throughout the game shows up again. The best part is that, right now, in this very moment, Rebecca's water breaks, so Kenny has to help Rebecca with the baby while the entire crew tries to wrestle the zombies away from the tourist station. But there are just so many walkers. Clementine gets the bright idea to block the door off with the cannon, which ends up completely collapsing the front entrance. Kenny's section is fine. He's okay. He's delivering a baby, blah, blah, blah. But this porch section completely falls apart. The only one caught in the crash is Sarah, who for some reason is standing right in the middle of this stand during this entire defense moment, rather than being cooped up in a corner like she has been for this entire chapter. She is never in the right place when she needs to be, and it's here you make a choice to either send Jane in to rescue Sarah or not. No matter what you do, Sarah gets eaten alive here. She dies. Sending Jane only risks her life even further. Clementine's parallel in many ways meets her final end here, in a fate worse than death, the one that Ben was so afraid of back in Season 1. This death is pretty brutal, if not because you already tried to save Sarah once and now she's really truly dead. It's probably the most tragic death of the whole game simply because we all knew it was going to happen. Kenny did his job, thank goodness, and Alvin Jr. is born. After a pair of pretty brutal episodes, the miracle of life gives everyone a well-deserved break and hope. Babies are a common trope in apocalypse media. There's really no better way to quickly symbolize the future, to symbolize hope, survival, life. Though obviously the nuance here is a little different. Unlike Sarah and Clementine, this baby won't grow up with television, food stamps, kindergarten. All this kid will know since they were born, so long as they survive, is nature, survival, and of course, zombies. Kenny's 180 after Alvin Jr. is born is a sight to see. All of a sudden, he's the guy making the right decisions. For Kenny, Alvin Jr. represents a third chance at making a life out of this place. Jane takes Sarah's death pretty hard. She apologizes to Clementine in the moment, and despite this seeming relationship that she might be having with Luke, she still sees our group as a disaster waiting to happen. This night of Alvin's birth, she says her goodbyes and leaves to fend for herself again. She trusted another group. She saw a little girl die for the second time in her life. She probably doesn't want to see that happen again with Clementine.
Sarah, I'm not gonna stick around and watch it happen to you too.
A decision is made to trek all the way to a town in the distance. Rebecca is not in a good state, but even she insists it's best to go find some better food and shelter before the winter sets in. Luke and Kenny are pretty angsty at this point in the story. They've been beefing throughout the whole game, and at this point, this slow, long walk to the next town only furthers their frustrations at each other's style of leadership. There can only be one. Remember Arvo? He's back, and he's got a little Russian posse with him. Seems like a group of Russian survivors were able to band together during the apocalypse. Who would have guessed that the choice to not rob Arvo still labels you as one just because Jane took the gun? A Mexican showdown in the winter. Call it a Russian showdown. Yeah, I got jokes, but the only thing that's funny here is the noise Rebecca is making a few feet over. When you look at Rebecca holding Alvin, you'll see that she's not only dead, she's already turned. Before zombie Rebecca can do anything to the poor baby, you can either choose to shoot her yourself or have Kenny shoot her without hesitation. Episode 4, Koniec.
Nobody!
No! Well, that happened.
When the fellas at Telltale were cooking up Season 2 of The Walking Dead, they probably thought about the most obvious thing Clementine will need to get over in the world of zombies, and that's survival. You know, it's interesting to think about survival in video games because there's an entire genre dedicated to that type of experience. We can obviously point to games like Minecraft, Subnautica, Terraria as examples of games where part of the fun isn't just jumping around, making fortresses, and killing monsters, but just getting a general understanding of your situation and dominating over nature. Survival games want you to start out like a bitch-ass bitch and then slowly turn you into God of the universe. Survival in The Walking Dead never gets that far, but part of the appeal in The Walking Dead verse is learning its rules. For Clementine, survival doesn't just mean hitting zombies in the head, putting zombie gunk on her face, and being evil to other people when you need to. It's being able to actually jam a hammer inside of a zombie's head, about having the arm strength to do so. It's about building a fire. It's about fending off a wild animal. It's about learning how to sew your arm back together. Clementine doesn't know how to do any of this at game start. She does learn a little bit more by the time Jane comes around, and we start to pick up on skills that not even Lee or Krista knew about, like hitting zombies in the knee to get a quick headshot. By the end of episode 4, Clementine is capable of surviving in the apocalypse on her own. She's got the skills she picked up with Lee and Charles from all the way back in Season 1. She's got new skills that she's picked up in the first half of Season 2, and now she's seen how bad things can get and what she needs to do to survive.
Old walkers are a waste of time. They're holding credit cards and busted old pagers. But these ones weren't walkers all that long ago. They were survivors. They might have useful stuff.
When Sarah's death rolls around, it serves to show what would happen to a girl that didn't learn any of these things. Just like Clementine, Sarah loses her parents. She's forced to survive in a zombie apocalypse and must reconcile with complete strangers to make that happen. She doesn't, and she pays the ultimate price for it. Nothing Clem can do can save Sarah. It instead forces you to come to terms with a reality that could have been for Clementine if it wasn't for people like Lee and Luke and Jane and Kenny. Carlos wasn't a bad father. Sarah wasn't a bad person, but they were bad survivors. Carlos doesn't even die for anything he does in particular. His death is purely bad luck. But Sarah's death was avoidable. Not in a gameplay sense, but one in a narrative sense. The fact that Carlos sheltered her for so long shows us the consequences of bad daddy energy. And while Sarah doesn't get nearly enough time to come to terms with Carlos's death, like Clementine does with Lee or with her actual parents, she also didn't come in with that pre-existing skill set that Clem grew to learn over the course of Season 1. Imagine if, at every opportunity, Lee tried to shelter or prevent Clementine from learning how to shoot a gun. It's crazy because these are both still kids, but that's what we end up with in episode 4. Two kids, two very, very similar kids, but with completely different emotional control. Control which ultimately gets Sarah killed. The only criticism I have for Telltale is why was Sarah standing on this platform at all? When the scaffold breaks and Sarah dies, she's basically trapped under rubble. I don't think anyone trapped under all that debris could have made it out of alive, including Clementine. That first death in the mobile home feels much more appropriate for what the story is trying to say. That Sarah was physically unable to move comes off as a cheap death, whereas that mental, psychological barrier resonates much better with Sarah's character as a whole, with the purpose of her character in the story. And that of Jane's character, whose role mirrors Clementine in this situation when looking back at her younger sister's death. This is Clementine watching Sarah die, like Jane saw her sister die all those years ago. Going into episode 5, Clementine has all the tools in her belt to make a life out in the apocalypse. She's seen vulnerabilities shoved at her face. She's seen the extremes of naivete and pure malice, and she's learned handy skills to better survive on her own. Yet a hope still remains that she can make a life out of this place with a group. and it's only with a group that Clementine can survive against other rival factions.
He said he would leave us alone if I gave him a shown.
Episode 5 is our final chapter, and by some miracle, nobody in our group was killed off during the shootout between ours and Arvo's group. In fact, unless you count Rebecca, everyone survives the shootout while Arvo's group is virtually wiped out, leaving him behind as the only survivor. Thanks in part to Jane, who shows up to save Kenny just in time. Kenny has had it with Arvo and is ready to put him down permanently before the rest of the squad stop him from pulling the trigger. The decision is made to take Arvo along with us. He's apparently got a hideout nearby with food and water, so even if there's risk of more of Arvo's group out there, we take it and make him lead the way. Things couldn't be worse for our squad. We just lost Rebecca, making Luke the only remaining survivor of the cabin squad, all the way back at the beginning of the game. It sucks because unlike the rest of these other characters who have all lost people close to them long before the game starts, you're basically forced to see Luke go through this in real time, for the first time. We know that he and Nick used to be business partners, so for all intents and purposes, this has been Luke's group since before the apocalypse. They've made it farther together than Clem did with Lee. From Pete to Carlos, from Nick to Sarah, Luke's starting to see a pattern and is probably wondering when he'll be next.
Sitting in the snow, lean up against a tree, bullet in my leg. But alive. When so many of my friends are dead for no good reason. And I couldn't do anything to stop it. Everyone we set out with just gone.
Likewise, Kenny is the only member left of the ski lodge and our only connection to the previous game. He's managed to hold some of his shit together in the wake of Rebecca's baby, who he's dubbed as Alvin Jr.
I was thinking we'd go with Alvin Jr. What do you think? Rebecca mentioned she'd like to name him Alvin if it was a boy. I mean, Rebecca was so out of it she hadn't settled on a name. It seems fitting.
Huh, yeah. I like it.
Alvin Jr. it is. Do you like that? Well, I think AJ approves.
Yeah, when I replayed this game for this video, I'd completely forgotten the fact that it's Kenny who names Alvin Jr. For some reason, I thought that it was Clementine or Rebecca who do this, in solidarity with Alvin's death. But Kenny's the one who does it. Alvin Jr. becomes an important character in the final season, and Kenny's big legacy ends up being his first name. Despite this sudden change in character, Kenny continues to be incredibly overprotective of Alvin, and the only person he trusts completely is Clementine. So it becomes very important, now more than ever, for Clementine to hold him back from his own demons. Jane is back, and she's changed her mind on the whole surviving alone thing. She's clearly still antisocial, but it's thanks to Clementine that she's decided to come back. Everything hinges on Clementine in this final episode. She's not so accidentally become the glue that holds this team together, or at the very least, the three most important characters of this group. More and more, you start to see where Mike and Bonnie's thoughts lie, particularly with Kenny. There's resentment harboring up, and it almost feels like they're hiding you from it because you're just a kid, but won't hesitate to make you do all the heavy lifting, all the important tasks throughout the game. It kind of becomes a bit of a meme if you start counting how many times the plot hinges on Clementine doing all the hard work. We get a chance to hang out with the group again. It's Luke's birthday during the night, so we get a fun scene where everyone loosens up with a bottle of alcohol found on the way to Arvo's base. This is the last opportunity that Clementine will get to drink some booze this game, but she'll risk pissing Kenny off for some reason. Maybe it's the fact that it's an 11-year-old.
I mean, after you, obviously.
Really?
No.
There's a clear fracture in the group here. Everyone seems to be having a good time, but Jane and Kenny distance themselves at every opportunity. You can try to convince them to get closer, but only Jane seems to take that chance. This whole episode is building up towards its conclusion. At every opportunity, characters start to warn you about this final impending decision you'll need to make. It's obvious by now that you're going to have to choose to side with or against Kenny. You don't know how, you don't know in what way, and it's not even clear what the context might be, but you better get ready. Arvo himself isn't doing too great either, and every chance Kenny gets to beat the shit out of him is another chance to agitate the rest of the group. Even Kenny's starting to realize he might be going too far, but it doesn't stop him from doing it again the next day. Which takes us to the river cross scene. The house Arvo's been taking us is right over there. I can't tell if this is actually a lake, or a river, or a stream. I really hope, for the sake of Telltale and this game, that this is just a massive, massive river that couldn't be rendered by the game's engine. Because if this was anything else, a pond, a stream, a lake, and we didn't try to cross around it, yeah, you'll understand my frustrations in a second. Crossing over the stream, walkers start to show up in mass again. While most of the crew is able to make it out, Luke is the one caught by some very thin ice. A choice is given here, to either wait for Luke to make it out himself or get closer to help. Bonnie practically begs you to take a chance to help him yourself. It didn't make sense to me to get closer, but I did it anyway just to see what would happen. And yeah, we both fall into the ice.
To go!
No!
Now!
Clem, it's too dangerous.
Clementine, stop!
Clementine!
It's here that Luke meets his end. No matter what you tried to do, whether you actually went in to save Luke or tried to wait for him to help, Luke is dragged into the icy lake by a random-ass swimming zombie, never to be seen again. This scene sucks, but it doesn't suck for the same reason that Sarah's death sucked. It sucks because it felt like Luke's character was built up for no reason. I'll admit it, I liked Luke, so seeing him die made me upset. But I can tolerate a likable character dying if it ultimately serves the story. Lee's death in Season 1 was completely upsetting. I wanted any excuse to see him survive till Season 4, but his story had ended. His goal was to save Clementine, and he did that. His death solidifies that story. It's one generation delivering another to survival. It fucking works. Luke dies and that's that. We mourn for a little bit right after, but it never gets brought up again. None of the events from the previous chapters end up coming in clutch to save Luke. It's just tragedy for the sake of tragedy, to make our current survivors feel more desperate, and to change minds. After seeing that, do you really think Jane is still giddy about sticking to a squad? Instead, it feels that Luke had to be killed off, because the final showdown in this game has to be a binary choice. And in a game hyping up 3 potential caretakers for Clementine, it wouldn't be possible to give us a third one and have it be its own separate faction from Jane. You know, Luke clearly has an obvious bias towards Jane, so it makes a little bit less sense to have him face off against her. Though maybe there could have been an interesting way to write that in. I'm not a writer though. Either that, or at some point in development, Luke's role was replaced with Jane's. I don't want to commit to this claim here, because I just don't know if it's true. It did cross my mind when I played this game and when I saw this moment happen. Replacing Luke with Jane here would make the ending make a bit more sense. If Jane dies here and it's Luke who faces off against Kenny, then all that drama about who to sit with for dinner, who to blame for stupid things, who to give credit to, all those would have been simple buildups to this final climactic moment. Instead, any time you decided to stick with Luke gets undone right here. It never mattered. It might work fine as a story, but as a video game, it's misleading. There are games that do this successfully, giving you the option to hang out with characters only for them to die earlier than others. It can work, but it doesn't work here. The entire meetup in the campfire was building up towards this moment, sure. Half the conversation involves Luke. Hell, the whole reason we're celebrating is because it's his birthday. But as a narrative death, it just doesn't feel like Luke's character was utilized well enough towards the ending.
To the loved ones that we've lost along the way. And to the hope that we see them again. Someday.
Clementine almost freezes to death trying to help Luke, and it's in this log cabin where drama hits a peak. Everyone is justifiably upset at Luke's death, and Kenny has decided to take it out on Arva, who made a break for it during the whole lake sequence, implying that it may or may not be his fault that the ice started to crack. But it's never directly stated that. As things stand, it feels like sticking with Kenny could be inherently dangerous. In a lot of ways, Kenny has started to resemble the man that took his eye.
What? Lose your taste for this sort of thing?
Kenny manages to fix a truck right outside the cabin, and an argument breaks out on where we should go next. Kenny thinks we should still try to find Wellington, but the way the weather is looking, and the fact that we're heading even more north, we might freeze to death before we even find Wellington, if it exists. The rest of the squad want to go south, toward the hardware store, and maybe continue on to Texas. Yeah, so when Führer Kenny over here refuses to abide by the democratic process, the rest of the crew decides to ditch this squad, jumpstart the car, and get the fuck out of here. Notably, they don't let you, Jane, or Kenny in on this plan. Understandably with Kenny, but why do Jane and Clem get the short end of the stick? Arvo gets to fucking join. He might be responsible for Luke's death. And he shoots me, but Jane's not invited? Seriously, Bonnie? Genuinely betrayed, we ditch these three fucks and make our way through the wilderness. We will never see Arvo, Mike, or Bonnie ever again. Nothing you could do could have prevented this betrayal, but the signs were there from the start. Clem passes out from the gunshot wound and wakes up in the back of the truck, on the way to God knows where, accompanied by Jane, Alvin, and Kenny. Hush now, Clementine. The adults are fighting. Seriously though, after 4.5 episodes of rising tensions between the big kids, The Walking Dead Season 2 pits our final two parental figures in a one-on-one. The fight itself is kind of ridiculous. First, Kenny jumps out of the car to go fetch some gas, only for walkers to appear again out of nowhere, straight ahead, in the middle of a freezing blizzard. I thought they were supposed to, slow down during the cold or freeze up. Guess not. Next, Jane decides it's best to ditch the car and go find some refuge. And instead of going together, you split up to find the rest stop about a mile away. When you get there, you find Kenny, who's freaking out because where's the caveman? And he's the sheriff. But oh look, there comes Jane. Without Alvin? Did she leave Alvin behind? Did she kill him? Kenny charges at Jane and she basically says,
no matter what happens, just stay out of it.
Only for her to get her ass completely beat by Kenny. After everything is said and done, you're given a choice. The most important choice in the entire game. Who do you save? Kenny has been your guy since the very first game in the series. You've seen him after the deaths of Duck, Katja, Sarita. You've seen him get beat within an inch of his life. You've seen him make the hard choices without flinching. And you know you could probably make it pretty far with a badass motherfucker like Kenny. Walking around, shooting anyone who gets close. But he's become erratic, antisocial, violent. He's been willing to snap at Clementine in the past and almost seems to care more for Alvin Jr. than he does Clementine. What if she has to make a choice between him and Alvin? Would he treat her the same way he did Jane? Jane has been your gal since the very first moment the two of you got to bond in episode 3. She's clearly street smart, she knows how to survive in the wilderness and has a good head on her shoulders. She's willing to make changes in her own life due to her relationship with Clementine. She's not some robot either, she's got feelings, emotions, wants, and you've gone through quite a lot together through the deaths of Sarah and Luke. She might not be a motherly figure, but she definitely fits the bill of an older sister. For Jane, Clem is that little sister she once had. But Jane is irrational, antisocial, and unwilling to let anyone else get too close to her. If she and Clementine ever disagree with each other, would she also leave her the same way she did Luke? Old versus new. It's a tale as old as time. If The Walking Dead Season 2 needed a subtitle, like Season 3's A New Frontier, then old versus new would probably have worked fine. It's a good thing I'm not a marketing person though, because that name fucking sucks. The theme of old versus new haunts this game more than the zombies do. There's a consistent tension between the new characters of the game, namely Luke and Jane, with the older characters, mainly Kenny. Telltale has been giving you subtle hints as to which direction to take, but never gives you an answer outright. That's for you to solve. In episode 1, we're pretty quickly presented with an old versus new decision, when choosing between Nick and Pete. Now obviously Pete has been bit by a whole zombie, but it's not like that makes choosing him any less valid. He's got a life too, and one worth living. Why should we be the ones to make that choice for him? In episode 2, we meet Kenny, the physical manifestation of the old faction, in a familiar form, one that represents family above all else. In episode 3, we met Jane, the physical manifestation of the new, in stranger form, one that represents independence above all else. I'd argue that Clementine herself represents the new too, because outside of Alvin, she's the youngest character in the story. But her purpose in the story isn't really to be a representative of a faction, more so to absorb these contrasting ideologies and to act as an agent of either one of them. Episode 4 reinforces these two sides by showing you the advantages of being strong together and being strong alone. The weak can survive when grouped up, but the strong do even better if left to their own devices. And here we are at episode 5, the culmination of all these moments. The game wants you to pick, based on everything you've seen so far, not just from Kenny and Jane either. Think about all the other things that have happened throughout this game. Carver's utilitarian philosophy, this idea that the next generation needs to get used to making tough, violent decisions in order to survive. Sarah and Carlos's unwillingness to change and learn about what it takes to survive. Weakness isn't just a physical issue. Sarah was mentally unable to survive the apocalypse. Clement is just as strong. She's actually a bit shorter than Sarah, but makes it much farther because she's locked in. Sarita is a reminder that shit can go horribly wrong, and Alvin Jr. a beacon of hope, a reason to see what we're all fighting for. The game wants you to think about all these things and decide, are you with the old, or are you in with the new? The great news is, this choice matters. You can end up with about 7 different endings depending on who you pick. If you choose to save Jane, Kenny dies by your hand. If you choose to let Jane dies by Kenny's hand. That's it. There's no contrived undo button, no follow-up where Jane jumps out of the bushes with a knife through her heart and kills Kenny anyway. Nope. This is it. There's a set of additional choices after making either one of these big ones that locks you into smaller deviations of the main ending you're getting. So let's go through them and then you can judge which one you like best. If you chose Kenny, then you'll still get an option to shoot him in the head.
Do it. Just do it.
You don't have to, but it's there. Either way, you'll find Alvin Jr. crying his heart out in an abandoned car. Jane must have left him there to prove some sort of point. If you shot Kenny, then the game will end on that note. You and Alvin set yourselves out on a journey to continue surviving, alone this time. Everyone you knew throughout this game is either dead or dying, but you're still standing, a not-so-lone survivor. Sticking with Kenny despite everything lets you finally reach the mythical town of Wellington, where you'll be held up at the gates and forced to pick between Wellington and Kenny. Ironic that, after everything is said and done, that Kenny was right about Wellington. I doubt that everybody else would have been let in, but if Kenny had just kept his cool, maybe Bonnie, Mike, and Jane would all have been here to persuade Wellington to let us all in. It's not like Kenny's people skills are all that great. Kenny seems to be completely fine with leaving you at Wellington, but you can still choose to go back to the wilderness with him anyway. Doing so will unlock a unique cutscene in Season 3, where you'll find out the events between now and the start of Season 3. On the other hand, deciding to stay in Wellington gets you a pretty grueling farewell to Kenny. It's very emotional. This is the only character up until this point that has been in our playthroughs about as much time as Clementine herself. And now we're saying goodbye to him in much the same way we had to say goodbye to Lee. Worth noting though, Kenny is never seen again after this ending. Like I mentioned before, choosing to go with Kenny after Wellington results in this awkward transitionary cutscene in the third game, which I'll just reveal now, ends up with his demise right then and there. Choosing Wellington never confirms Kenny survives, or dies, for the rest of the series, so if you ever needed to inhale some sweet, sweet copium, this is the only possible ending where Kenny might survive the franchise. Everything in this cutscene makes me double down on my pro-Kenny choice. The guy is clearly unstable. He even says it himself. Look, there it is. He says it, not me. Yet this sequence where Kenny basically breaks down and is fully willing to give Clem and Alvin a chance with a group of strangers, seeing the hurt in his voice, his bruised and battered appearance, it didn't make the choice any easier. It's funny, in hindsight, that after all the shit we've been through, neither Kenny nor Clem make any effort in vetting Wellington before leaving or joining this place. We've dealt with cannibals, fascists, bandits, but suddenly we're willing to let 2 children join some settlement alone? I'm willing to let it slide, since they were willing to give up some extra supplies, and the fact that Wellington actually is a good faction, but Kenny and Clem should know better by now. Either way, Kenny's goodbye is still pretty memorable. A solid way to conclude our journey with this character. He's gone through so much and come out of it significantly worse for wear. I'd be lying if I hadn't thought about what Kenny might do to himself, now that his 2 reasons to live are on the other side of the most heavily fortified settlement we've yet seen. But I try not to think about that. Kenny is an endlessly controversial character. Your perception of him might be completely different after this game. Much has been said about how different he is compared to that first game, and my opinion is really that I enjoyed the monster he became. Putting a familiar face on a character this conflicted really wouldn't work without someone we've already built a relationship with, both the player and Clementine. Yet the decision to kill him still feels like the wrong one to make, which is really my biggest issue with this character. Kenny needed more of an oomph to push him over the edge right now. It feels like most players will still tend to pick Kenny despite everything that he's willing to do, and that doesn't strike me as particularly good writing if the intention was to make a hard, difficult 50-50 split choice. It just didn't end up feeling that way. Yet I enjoyed the relationship with Jane and Luke all the same, but never managed to manifest that in a worthwhile interaction. Jane's ending instead feels like I was stabbed in the back. Electing to go with Jane instead gives you the same option to ditch Jane or sticking together. Ditching Jane gives you the exact same ending as with killing Kenny, where you and Alvin set out to go do your own thing. What exactly was Jane thinking here? On one hand, I was ready to side with Jane pretty much the moment this episode started. To me, Kenny was already off the deep end and completely overtaken by grief, rage, and paranoia. But once you finally deal with Kenny by shooting him yourself, you get this heartbreaking moment where he apologizes for everything he did up until this point. After the whole of Season 1 and the entirety of Season 2, Kenny's journey ends here by your hand. That's the only way that Kenny can die in this game.
We almost made it. We were close, weren't we?
Then, we finally get to hear what Jane's plan was all along. So apparently, Jane wanted to make it look like Alvin died, so that Clementine could see the real Kenny. A big, hulking, raging monster willing to take it out on anyone that hurts his tribe.
You saw how he reacted. I had to show you what he was capable of. It was a stupid plan.
So when Jane makes it look like she really did kill Alvin, refused to explain herself, then pounced on him with a knife, it all kind of feels like Jane maybe low-key, high-key tried to manipulate Clementine into siding with her. It completely spoils the decision to go with her because ultimately she wins. She got what she wanted. Alvin and Clementine are alive, Kenny's finally been dealt with, and we can go wherever we want and be a happy family, just the ladies. What the fuck? I wouldn't blame anyone for leaving Jane after this one. I felt cheated after this ending with Jane. Anyways, if you do continue with Jane, you end up back at Carver's hardware store. It's been completely ransacked by the walkers, but is at the very least totally empty. Jane and Clementine decide to stay put, maybe make something out of this place. No sign of Mike or Bonnie or Arvo either, so it's all ours. Eventually, a group of survivors does make their way into the hardware store and ask to be let in. You can pick between good and evil Clementine at this point. I think that the best ending in this game is letting Jane live and letting the family in. It goes directly against Jane's own philosophy, which serves as a way to teach her what's right and who's the boss in this son of a bitch. And in some ways, Kenny's good has managed to ingrain itself into Clementine. You're still looking out for the larger group. There is still hope in this world. If you say no to the family, then you end up with the evil Clementine ending. The version with the most ridiculous final pieces of dialogue ever written in the Walking Dead games, and probably the version of Clementine closest to the one we end up in the sequel, an untrusting, independent girl with a low tolerance for strangers.
Don't do this.
Are you sure you want to do this, little girl? I mean, what if we're dangerous?
What if I am?
Telltale wants you to take these final choices very seriously. It's the final test based on all the previous available information given to you throughout the game. You know, this isn't a political compass test, right? Just because the choice is between old versus new doesn't mean you're picking between old man versus young person. But what if it was? What if the game does want you to think about those kinds of things? Ultimately, neither the Kenny nor the Jane decisions feel all that satisfying. Yet going through one or the other, knowing what your own political beliefs are, could say a lot. They can be validating, surprising. If you went with Jane, but consider yourself more on the conservative side, then suddenly you've got yourself a much more nuanced explanation to make. Things aren't as black and white. Turns out, you're complex. Likewise, if you're someone who doesn't align with anything, maybe even a more centrist personality, then you can still decide to ditch both Kenny and Jane, resulting in an ending that also feels like it's more appropriate to the Clementine we see in Season 3. The fact is that all of this is possible. Telltale made an intentional choice to actually give you an outcome that varies based on this final choice, built on all of those themes and ideas from beginning to end. Telltale made me think really hard about this game, and it told me two things. One, I need to go outside. And two, there is a ton of value in a game's narrative experience. The Walking Dead Season 2 is probably most people's least favorite out of the 4 seasons. Unfortunately, it happens to be mine too. I still felt like the game dropped the ball in a couple of areas. Luke's whole character just built up and thrown away for no reason. Kenny felt like a character that already had a story worth telling in Season 1, just for shit to hit the fan and completely recontextualize him. Some would call it a character assassination. Not sure if I'd go that far, but playing through Season 1 in hindsight breaks my heart a little bit. I still think that this game has a lot of value. So much work was put into making this story work from beginning to end. I hope I've at least highlighted some of the elements that were kept consistent from episodes 1 to 5. I haven't even gotten into how great this game looks. Art design was always Telltale's secret recipe. It works so well for a game based on a comic book. But the true soul of this game is in its story, its characters, and what Telltale decides to do with them once put together. I hope that you've learned at least one thing from this video. It took a while to make, but I have nothing but good things to say about Season 2, so I suggest you check it out yourself. Make your own decisions. I haven't covered everything you can see in this game, so there's probably still one or two themes that I didn't even think about. Till next time, thank y'all so much.